Hal and Betty would look at all the information for where all the contests are, which one is the most money, and that's the competition they would go and try to win. And they would win. Everybody else who was competing at that time would say, oh, there's a contest tonight, we're going to go compete. The first question they ask is, where is Hal and Betty going to be at? Because we're going over here. Nobody wanted to compete against Hal and Betty because they would lose. Dean Collins from Harlem, I should say he learned to dance in Harlem, from New York, him and Hal were a rivalry from the very beginning, all the way through, because Dean Collins had seen the best in the world, the Lindy Hoppers in Harlem, in the Savoy, Whitey's Lindy Hoppers. Dean liked to give credit to Al Mims. And Dean, knowing what the Whiteys and what the Harlem dancers were all about, and seeing Hal, he always would try to beat Hal, but he could not beat Hal. So Dean Collins and Hal, even though they were rivals, Dean Collins respected Hal, that even though they were rivals, it was a lifelong friendship. That was a bond that was never broken. But at the same time, it was very frustrating for Dean Collins, because Dean knew what it took to win competitions and so forth. And so at the same time, even though there was that rivalry, there was a respect there. And Dean Collins started putting on competitions as well. And Dean Collins obviously had his students as well that he taught the Lindy to. People like Lenny Smith, people like Lou Southern, and Wally Albright would probably be the most three famous of Dean's students, of the leaders. Dean would put these competitions on, and of course his students would get in the competition. And then Dean would call up Hal and say, come and compete in my competition. Of course Hal knew, no. This is not how you're going to ever beat me, you know. And so this competition aspect of tempos really became the most important thing in the dance. We have the tempos, when they were slower, they would do the Lindy Hop. Slower tempo meaning it could be around 200 to 230, 240. The Ray-Ran dancers at this time had all learned the Lindy Hop, the Lindy step that Dean knew as well, so they could implement it into their social dance as well as slower dancing. However, when the music got fast, they would go back to their old swing, their Bal-Swing, and mix it in there so they could dance much faster, longer, and more comfortable at faster tempos. So during a competition, when they're all doing the dance, keep in mind at this time the competitions were not a special dance competition. They didn't say just do this dance or do this dance. They said it's a jitterbug dance. You can do whatever you want. One of the famous advertisements would say, a jitterbug contest. Come see the Ray-Ran swing, the Lindy Hop, truckin', Susie Q, peckin'. And so jitterbug competitions, you could do any of these dances. It did not matter. It was based upon who was the best or who was the most original still. For instance, Connie Weidel would be in these competitions as well, but all he would do is just the shag. And he would be competing against all these other dances and dance styles. But these Beach City dancers, the Ray-Ran dancers, in the competitions, they would take money out of their wallet and sneak it to the band leader during the competition to play fast, really fast. These dancers, these Ray-Ran dancers, very, very proud of their dance and the style in which they did their dance. I'm talking about Maxie Dorf, Hal Takir, Lolly Wise, and Gil Fernandez. Those four dancers were very proud of their dance. It is the fastest dance in the world to them, and they are willing to prove it in a friendly way. It was all very friendly. It was not anything serious. It was a very friendly thing, but they were very proud of their dance form, and it was like they had a chip on their shoulder, and they were willing to prove it. And so they learned all these other dances. Of course they did. But they still had their old style of swing, which we call Bal-Swing today. So for these dancers, these other dances called the shag and the Lindy Hop became just a step in their Bal-Swing. And Hal Takir, who I mentioned before, started going to the, obviously back then, going to the movies. And in the movies, guess who they saw in 1937? they saw Day at the Races, and Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, and they saw the air steps, areas. So Hal started putting air steps in his swing, just like all the other swing dancers. They all started putting that, and they would do is they'd watch the movie, and they would sit through the whole movie and watch the movie again, just to see the dance part. So this was the generation of swing dancers. After this generation, there was no more new dancers learning their dance. They were learning the more popular dance, the Lindy, which was making a big hit during World War II. The Lindy, like I said, although it first came to Los Angeles first by Dean in 37, it became the most popular dance by 39, 40, and 41. We start seeing it in all kinds of movies. I think Dean Collins is probably the most filmed Lindy dancer in history by far. I don't know exactly how many movies he did, because every time I say a number, I discover a new movie. But it's well over 40 movies he did the Lindy in just the short time of 40 to 45. So we have this dance, which I've mentioned, what they called swing. In the newspapers, they called it Randy Swing, after Ray Randazzo. It basically, the first time we know of it, 32, by World War II, it was already fading away because of the social tempos of the sound of the big band era going into World War II. We obviously hear the stories about Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey, and the more, I guess you could say, the slower tempos of World War II. From 40 to 45, the tempos dropped for social dancing a lot compared to the 30s, which was a little more up-tempo. Okay, so basically, what we have is these dancers, of course they kept doing their dance all through history. They kept doing it. They did. But they mixed it with the Lindy when they social danced. And from 1945, I would say the dance, for the most part, ended, except for them who continued to do the dance. It wasn't until 1961, Disneyland, Carnation Plaza, they opened up the big bands. They hired Benny Goodman to play at Disneyland in 1961. And all of the swing era dancers came together for the first time since the swing era, under the same roof. And they remembered each other. Dean remembered so-and-so, and they shook hands, and they became friends again. In 1961 was the first time they were reunited. And for the first time, we have the Balboa dancers who didn't want anything to do with the jitterbugs, dancing in the same small area with these dancers for the first time in 1961, without the 5,000 foxtrotters anymore. 1961 in Disneyland, Anaheim, which is right, boom, there. Because of Benny Goodman and the dance floor, the Carnation Plaza is very small. It's as big as this room. And so for the first time, we have all the dancers on top of each other, really close. And talking about the swing era, sometimes they would recognize one another by the face. Maybe sometimes they did not, but they shared stories. But it was the first time that these two different types of dancers came together. And because of this camaraderie, or this relationship of going back in time, they started sharing steps and mixing up these dances of Lindy, swing, and the Balboa.